Hi, everybody. I'm Corrie Thompson, and I'm in the painting program at TCU.
Hi, I'm Adrianna Touch, and I'm in the sculpture program second year.
Today, we're just going to do a talk about our candidacy show. And before we jump into the video that we made beforehand, I thought I would just explain what candidacy is. TCU's MFA program is 3 years, and halfway through the program, they have all the second year students put on a show that just kind of makes you develop a complete body of work from start to finish. So today we will be talking about ours, and then next week the other two second years will be talking about their work in the same show.
Hi everyone. I'm going to give you a quick tour of my work in Softer Fields, which is a group show between myself and the 3 other second year MFAs at TCU. This work is on view at Fort Worth Contemporary Arts through February 20th. So I made this series of drawings in the fall of 2020, and while drawing has been part of my life for as long as I can remember, I've been very much focused on it this past year. I had wanted to work with night imagery for a while, and I found that simplifying my medium to just graphite on paper was kind of a freeing limitation that allowed me to do that. I really loved uncovering the conflicting or dual elements that were already there in the night imagery, like shadow and light, exposure and privacy, and peace and vigilance. I was thinking a lot about fear of the dark, of my own experiences of fear, and how to tap into fear as something that I have in common with people rather than a bad thing that isolates us. So as soon as I was able to shift my perspective about fear, night became a time of real curiosity for me. All of these drawings started with source photos or occasionally videos that I've taken myself, often while walking to or from my car at night. I started paying attention at these moments because I felt uneasy in them, but I was also amazed by how beautiful the night looks, like every night. And that complicated feeling was really compelling, so I would stop to take it in. In order to emphasize the tension in the drawings, I found a lot of ways to crop the source images or videos in order to only reveal part of the scene. And I would then arrange these cropped images so that they were at odds with the paper. I was also working on a very thick, soft printmaking paper, which absorbs a lot of graphite, and its surface gets a bit ragged if it's worked into very much. So there was kind of a material and spatial tension that I was intentionally incorporating into these pieces, beyond just the content of the imagery itself. I really wanted the negative space on the page to create like a push and pull with the drawings, which was something that I mirrored with the installation of the work on these painted background areas. I really expected our campus and therefore our studios to close down within weeks of opening last fall. So from the beginning of this work, I was trying to problem solve for a lack of time and uncertainty. I decided to leave the work unframed and to incorporate a range of sizes that would be easier to transport and complete at home if need be. Campus never did close down again, but that sense of uncertainty I think did end up permeating the images. Each of these arrangements is titled, and each of them developed from a companionship between 2 or more of the pieces. This first one is called I Will Tend the Night Garden, which is a phrase I've been turning over in my head for a few years at this point. I liked the idea of tending to something that grows in the dark, some latent thing that could be wonderful or horrible. I kept this arrangement to just 2 pieces in order to set up a sense of duality as someone might walk up to encounter the work. These were also some of the first drawings that I made in the series, and the kind of ominous emptiness behind the window paired with the stillness of the trees is what instigated a lot of my thoughts behind the series. The second group is called Come Again to the Valley of Decision, which again is a phrase that I've been considering for a while. It's actually a manipulation of language from the Old Testament that I used in my bachelor's thesis show, and it seemed appropriate to revisit it now. I love apocalyptic language, and if ever there was an apocalyptic year, this was it. This group came together around the 2 smaller pieces where there's this feeling of maybe catching a glimpse of something from around a corner, but not knowing what it is or not not getting there yet. These were two of my later drawings, and they're both good examples of cropping as a form of control over the subject matter. So in these ones, I'm allowing only small, manageable windows into an unbound, intangible thing. The third group is called The Sky is Yours and Always Will Be, which I came up with while working on the drawing to the left. I wanted to include a note of promise or peace in all the darkness. When I pay attention on any given night, I find the accumulated sensations and memories of many previous nights, which have ranged from peaceful to traumatic for me. In this kind of headspace, clouds, fences, curtains, shadows that you see here are all much more than they may initially appear. So the drawings reflect a compression and fullness of time that I think is hard to name, but is worth exploring. My goal with this series was to offer the viewer something familiar, where even if the image is ominous, you might be able to say, I know this kind of place, or I recognize this feeling. I want us to acknowledge that we are all always facing the unknown. So that was about 5 months of work boiled down into 5 minutes. I hope you all enjoyed it and will have some good questions for me. Thanks for watching.
My body of work reflects on incomplete inheritance resulting from familial loss. Each piece is made in the act of a loving gesture. A loving gesture in honor of the passing of my 2 grandmothers. The imaginative forms I render start to create their own fiction that informs my own reality. The imaginative forms become reincarnations of my grandmothers, but also a reconstruction of my own identity as a Cambodian American woman.
Okay, so I was thinking maybe we could start off our conversation with Adrianna explaining the title of the show, Softer Fields, a little bit.
Yeah, so honestly, I can't take all the credit. One of our colleagues who's also in the show, which you'll hear next week, Fernando, was thinking of idioms such as "the grass is always greener on the other side." And when we're trying to like think of all the themes that kind of can like put a thread to like what connects us to all the work, is that we're all dealing with some sort of chaos or thing that kind of threw off balance, and trying to find balance or peace or other things of that nature. I guess, for example, with my work, it deals a lot with grief and longing, and with those pieces, I'm trying to find strategies to deal with that grief, or, you know, things of that nature. Do you have anything to add, Corrie?
No, I think that does it pretty well, but I think that is probably a good lead into one of the questions that we just got, which is whoever this is loves how they can feel the weight of the sand in the first piece, and what you're hoping the viewer takes away from that. Could you elaborate on the significance of the chair?
Yeah. So basically, so they're referring to the first piece as you walk in. The title of the piece is called Chair with Mound. And the sand is in reference to my background. So in so we celebrate Cambodian New Year, which happens around April. And in New Year's, you generally prepare yourself for the new year by honoring your ancestors and kind of starting anew, basically. And one of the rituals that is done is that at temple, you kind of make this giant mound, and you like give offerings like incense or ribbons or even cigarettes to some degree. And so in a sense, using that type of ritual to honor like someone who has passed on is like my strategy of like grieving with that loss of a family member. And but also you feel that weight of like a burial ritual too, like someone's buried under but then it's like, I don't know, there's all these complicated feelings of like grief, but also like at peace of someone's death and like realizing, I don't know, that part of them. So, and also I guess the chair is also in reference to a memory I've had as a child. So I mentioned like cigarettes. So like, it's like, I guess it's trying to signal a memory I've had with smoking and how that led to someone's death of like lung cancer. So it's like all these like complicated feelings into that one piece. I don't know. I hope I explained it well. It's like so much.
I really like in that piece how the chair is like, you can feel how heavy the sand is on the chair, but the chair is also holding up the sand. So there's this, there's this complicated relationship between the two things.
Yeah.
Man, we have a lot of questions.
I know.
I don't know. Do you want to like just jump straight in and go all the way through them, or?
Let's just get into the discussion. So I found one for you, Corrie.
All right.
Can you elaborate on your use of thresholds throughout your work? And also, I guess they're also referring to the bars and veils in your drawings.
Yeah. Probably in the past year or so, I've been thinking about how a lot of the like views and environments that I've seen are almost always through like windows or screens or fences or other types of barriers. And I've wanted to incorporate that as just kind of just a visual method in my work. I think it kind of offsets a lot of the organic imagery in the drawings. But I like the conversations that can kind of initiate too about like which side of a barrier you're on or who has the power to put it there. Yeah, I would say that's where that comes from. And I think in these drawings, particularly because I'm dealing so much with interiors and the outside, I think those kind of like delineations between those spaces just kind of happen naturally.
Yeah. That's great. Do you want to? So I have another question for you, Corrie. Do you feel you are isolating? Do you feel isolating times or setting it free from constraints of narrative?
Let's see. There's always kind of an element of narrative in my work. And it does stem from personal experience often. And in this case, I wanted to step back from like specifics of my story and kind of just take pieces of it in order to get at the effects of like tension and fear and just feeling caught between things and places. So yeah, I would say that I am stepping back from narrative in them. Although I do think there's still a relationship to time.
Yeah. I also feel like in your drawings, you're also giving the viewer those type of complicated feelings of the night. Like it's peaceful, it's, restless. It's like, always on the tension of those two dualities, which I really appreciate about the work. And I feel like it's not necessarily narrative, but like, some like themes that everyone could relate to. And I don't know. Yeah. So
I mean, I guess this also relates to the question that we have about whether or not the end product resembles the plan for the piece, or if I stick to the source image or the sketch very strictly. And the answer is no. I do start with source images and I do look at them pretty often in the beginning, but as the piece develops, it changes. So they do start with a moment in time, but as the drawing itself becomes a thing, it is less and less connected to that moment when the idea for it started. And often the material kind of evolves in a way that makes it impossible to stick with the initial like moment when I thought this would make a good drawing. So I do have to be pretty attentive to like what is actually happening on the paper for it to resolve itself.
Yeah.
Let's switch to questions for you. Can you talk more about the found objects or mundane objects and your use of them, or even like replication of them in the work?
Yeah, so it's funny because I don't know, I guess when you think if you're reflecting on your cultural background, you would think of something more, Pacific or, of that culture. But like in a way, it's like this like part of this kind of how most probably Asian Americans feel growing up, is like this dissociation to their culture because of the assimilation in America. And so like I guess when I guess with the basket, it was in reference to like the this of how my grandma passed away. Of like we found some of her things, and then for some reason I was just so drawn to her laundry basket, and then it immediately triggered memories because she passed away just like a year ago, like back in April, and I found this basket and I was just like so in awe by it. But then it like triggered a memory of like it's so morbid, but like the casket going into the furnace or where she got cremated. And so I was just thinking like how a basket can contain a body, but like also the clothes of that person's body. And so it's kind of like it's like these weird connections I'm making to it. And what else? Yeah.
That kind of leads me to something that I
Yeah.
was going to ask you, just to kind of like walk people through your creative practice, whether that's like a day in your studio or like the evolution of a piece from the first idea to the final form.
Yeah. I like to say that when I like try to go about making a piece, it feels like I do have like set plans, but at the same time, they don't always become the end result. I guess it's relating to your last question where I always compare it to like a walk in nature or something like. So I had this plan to go like through the forest, but then you see these paths deferring, and then you're like, oh, but I was gonna go to the forest, but then you from the corner of your eye you see like a waterfall, and you're like, ooh, a waterfall. I will eventually go back to the forest, but let's check out this waterfall first. And so I feel that's what clay. Mainly work in clay for the most part. So that's how I feel when I work in clay. Like, I had the set plan to make, the basket or whatever. But then like these curves and these coils and all these different mark making that I'm just like unintentionally making on the clay like leads me to somewhere. So I just kind of like some people like to take control of the clay. I feel like I don't want to take control of the clay. I want me and the clay to be like in symbiotic pair or something like that. So it's like it's pulling me and I'm pulling the clay. This like dance that we're taking. So a lot of it is very much like play, but also in wonder, in an adventure. And I'm like usually not worried of the end result because I don't know. Yeah.
I like that answer.
Thank you.
It's very, I think you have a really intuitive approach to working with clay, and I admire your flexibility. Sometimes I don't have that same flexibility when I'm in my studio. So it's been nice for me to have that as a model. Here's a good one.
Okay.
Do the small figures relate to community or family in your work?
Okay. So it's referring to the second piece with the big mad and all those little characters. That piece is called Apsara heads. Basically, these heads are in reference to Apsara, which is basically a kind of like a nymph-like goddess person in mythology in Cambodia and other Southeast Asian myths and such. And it's like one of the only few like female representations I see of my culture. And so, and they have this like, I wish I could show you a picture, but like they have these like really elaborate crowns because a lot of the ways the myths are told is through dance. And so a lot of them like, you know, use the form of dance to tell the story. So they have really elaborate costumes. And I guess for me to understand what exactly is going on, I replicate that form in like the way I draw things, which is usually more simplified, more in some ways childish or cartoonish or whatever. So it's in reference to their, I guess, their outfits. And I wanted to find my way to insert myself, I guess, in the culture. But in the same time, it's like also you're not truly understanding the form since it's not very complicated. It's a very simple interpretation of it.
Yeah.
But I also see them as those heads, as in like, because I mentioned a lot about like reincarnation is in like kind of like Buddhist like language in the work. Even though that place is coming more of like the knowledge of family than the knowledge of actually experience the actual religion or mythology, or not mythology, philosophy or way of thinking.
Yeah.
I kind of see it as like also reconnecting to like maybe an ancestral thing, like a very circle of life. Like I'm connecting not only to actual family members but to like my actual culture.
Yeah. It's like you're reconstructing it a little bit for yourself,
Yeah.
one piece at a time.
Yeah, exactly. I have a question for you, Corrie. Why is it important for you to explore the specific themes in this body of work? What are the themes you're interested in exploring in future work?
Oh, Well, I had actually wanted to make images of nighttime for a while, because to me, the night kind of just is a really good encapsulation of these like complicated feelings that I'm always trying to get at in my work. So to me, like it just functions as a really good metaphor for appreciating and encountering beauty on a regular basis, but also fear and the unknown. Yeah, nighttime is just this thing that we all experience all the time, or really just every night. And it can be a lot of different things. So to me, the imagery itself is really evocative and it can be pretty loaded. But I had never actually gone into it because I am not good at painting and I just couldn't get it to work with paint. But then in this past year, when I started focusing on drawing again, it just was like a really natural evolution, I think, because with graphite, you're working in monochrome anyway. So you can just focus on light and dark and like really bring out the kind of like, just like the moodiness of the shadows. Yeah. And I'm not going to answer the question about what I'm doing next because I still don't know.
Work, yeah. Is it okay if I throw another question at you?
Sure.
Someone asked if you can talk about your naming strategies and the decisions to the group drawings under the same title.
Yeah. Man, naming strategies, I really just like to ruminate on language. I was talking with a couple of people before this started about how my parents did Bible translation when I was growing up. And so a lot of my like childhood dinner conversations were just about like the nuances of biblical language and hearing these kind of like mythological stories over and over again. And I think that's really affected my kind of just like default attraction to this like really poetic, sometimes dramatic images and language. That being said, not all of my titles come from the Bible. It's often just like I'll hear a phrase or I'll read something or I'll just kind of get into like the definition of a word and then I'll turn that around for a long time. And eventually, because I think about these things a lot while I'm working, I just find words that seem like they fit really well for the ideas that I'm working on with images as well. So with these ones, I had a couple of those moments with the drawings, but I didn't have them with all of them. So then as I was kind of making these connections between the drawings and figuring out like what kind of almost like family groups I could put them in.
Oh yeah.
It just seemed appropriate to name them all the same thing. So within each set, it's like the sky is yours and always will be 1, 2, and 3. And I realize that they won't always stay together probably, but I like that the titles will kind of call back to this moment when I first released them into the world.
Yeah.
Here's one for you. Can you talk about the mat piece? Is there significance to the folds or the raised areas, or the clay figures that are migrating off of it?
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's getting really nitty-gritty of my arrangement.
Is it on purpose?
It is on purpose. I don't know if they really like mean a certain thing. It could, subconsciously be like, well, the way I guess the figures are like moving away from the mat, could be like some sort of weird significance of like my longing or like unable to connect with that culture or unable to feel this like fully fledged Cambodian woman or something. It's also in reference to a photo I have as a child where I'm just like on the mat and I'm like kind of surrounded with all my relatives. So I guess it's like,
this is the same mat that you have had your whole life.
yeah, actually it is. It's called a kate, which is like, yeah, it's a mat that you use for like picnics or eating outside. And I might have seen some vendors use them to like, sell their goods or something of those along those lines. So this is a personal mat that I've used like ever since I was a child. Like even for like 4th of July, we would bring it to like outside and watch the fireworks. Hopefully we can do that soon. The folds and the raised areas, I feel like mainly that's like kind of like an aesthetic choice. I don't know exactly what it means, but I also want to highlight of how used and like I guess used this item is. Like, there's a tear part of it at one end of the mat. And I don't know, I kind of also like visually like to see like, I don't know, my figures undulating through the mat. I don't know any great significance with that besides like aesthetic choices, but yeah, I don't know.
I can vouch for just like the amount of attention that Adrianna puts into this work when she's installing it. Because it like in the end it looks really effortless, but I was there for several hours and so was she, just like kind of standing and scooting around and like looking at all the pieces and making sure that each one is placed like just so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like we got a question for you, Corrie. Can you address the architectural elements in some of your pieces, especially those that make an opening, an open door, an open window, looking through a gate, etc.? Is there significance to the relationship of barriers?
I feel like I already answered this a little bit, but with the composition of these drawings, I was trying to experiment a little bit more than I normally would. Kind of cropping things and arranging them like in a way that they're kind of in tension with the paper that is actually holding them. And another way to emphasize that was to incorporate like doorways and windows, just the perspective of them in a way that's like kind of opening into the paper or leading off of it. I think a good example is the one of the fence over the clouds. So the direction of the fence is leading the eye up off of the page, but the moon is in the center of the page. So you can't really stay looking at the moon. Your eye like has to travel off the top, which leads you towards like the one little sliver of sky that's not covered up by the fence. That's about all I can say about that right now. I'm trying to see if there are any questions in here that we haven't gotten to yet.
Okay, yeah. I feel like we might have hit all
Might have
the.
gotten them all.
Yeah,
I have one for you.
Okay.
Last question.
Okay. On me, thanks.
Yeah. Have these pieces developed your understanding just on a personal level of what it means for you to be Cambodian American, or an artist who's Cambodian American?
Oh yeah. I feel like my mentors too also point this out. They always just say like, sometimes you're more Cambodian than you realize you are. And I'm like, oh, am I? And then I think back and I'm like, I kind of am, because even as a young age, I feel like I've always was aware of like, I guess like my background, or like what I project myself in the world as. Like, I realized I was like Asian or Southeast Asian, or in this particular, I was very aware of like what I am, I guess. And I've always was curious to know more, especially since the reasons why especially the reasons why I guess my family immigrated here was very, a very dark story of like genocide and war and, losing so many people already. And like, especially, I don't know, I feel like through this work, I'm like capsulating, yeah, how I feel as a Cambodian and trying to retain that as much as I can, because if it could have been lost already. So yeah.
I feel like I've seen you take a lot of, I don't know, just like ownership over yourself, or the way that you communicate about the pieces. There's a lot of authority in it.
Thank you.
I think we're basically 10 minutes over here, so we should probably wrap up.
Yeah, so thank y'all for coming to our talk today. Make sure you come back next Friday, February 12th, to talk to our other colleagues, Fernando Alvarez and Doug Land, so they can talk more about their part of the show. So stay tuned. Same time, same place, next Friday. So
yep. And if you need to see the work, there's a whole artsy page about it. You can like click through all the images.
Yeah, we have free tours, all our Facebook information, our Instagrams. Just follow TCU at galleries. And there's also a description of this in this video. So follow all those links.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.